Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to completely rethink how organizations actually build human competence. We're breaking down Guy W. Wallace's hard-nosed, strictly business-focused approach. He treats corporate training not as some nice-to-have HR perk, but as a rigorous, high-stakes investment portfolio. Seriously, if you've ever felt like corporate training is totally disconnected from the actual bottom line, you are absolutely going to love this perspective. Right off the bat, let's put you in the hot seat. Ask yourself, would you invest your own money in your company's training? This question instantly forces you into a shareholder's mindset. I mean, think about it. If it were your personal bank account funding that massive new e-learning rollout, would you actually sign the check? If your training isn't yielding a solid financial return, well, it's not a service, it's just a drain on equity. That one simple realization, it changes the whole game for how we view training and development, or T&D.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the corporate training trap, then move to treating T&D as a business, followed by the realities of cost and ROI. After that, we'll unpack the clock face model, deconstruct process chains, and finally, talk about assessing your investments.
Section 1. The corporate training trap, breaking the fad cycle. You see, far too many training departments are just totally fad-driven. They go out and buy expensive new knowledge management systems or launch these massive corporate universities, mostly just to sound hip. But this creates an ad hoc, learning by chance environment. It's kind of like throwing darts blindfolded. Wallace argues we absolutely must shift aggressively to learning by design. That means creating an engineered, deliberate response to critical enterprise needs. It's incredibly dangerous to adopt a whatever training mentality. Look, just because you bought an expensive e-learning platform doesn't mean you need to stuff it with generic courses just to justify the software cost. That is completely unacceptable to the bottom line. It's really only safe if the mere existence of these channels doesn't tempt us to keep them filled, just for the sake of keeping them filled.
Section 2, T&D as a business, the shareholder perspective.
So, to fix this trap, we need a massive mindset shift. Listen to this crucial point from the author. Training isn't done just because it feels good or because someone somewhere thinks a team needs to become better active listeners. No way. It is a calculated business decision. It has to be driven by the actual demands of enterprise leaders who need specific, tangible problems solved. In fact, training solely exists to improve human performance, where knowledge deficits are actively hurting your critical business processes. You've got to avoid learning just for the sake of learning. Instead, you're targeting those high payback strategic issues. Actually, scratch that. The goal isn't even to be a learning organization. The goal is to be a high-performing organization. Learning is just one of the tools to get you there.
Section 3, Cost and ROI Realities, Following the Money.
Let's talk about the financial realities. Because as any trusted business consultant will tell you, you've got to follow the money. Every single training initiative has to be measured against two key metrics. First, return on investment, or ROI, which is pretty straightforward, forecasted total returns minus your investment. But economic value added, or EVA, goes a step further. It's your true operating profit after you subtract the cost of all the assets it took to make that profit. Basically, you have to prove that T&D adds real, measurable economic value to the company. Every time you propose a new program, you have to strike a balance. You're comparing the cost of non-conformance, meaning the actual financial bleed caused by employee errors, against the cost of conformance, which is the dollar cost to train them up to the right standard. Simply put, if the cure costs more than the disease, it's a terrible investment. You also have to consider your company's hurdle rate. Let's say your proposed training program returns an impressive 500%. Sounds amazing, right? Well, if those exact same funds could earn 2,000% by being invested somewhere else in the business, your training just failed the hurdle rate. You're competing for capital against literally every other department in the enterprise. Section 4, the clock face model, structuring the system. Now that we've established the very real business stakes, let's dive into Wallace's actionable framework for assessing your entire T&D operation. This is the T&D Systems View clock face. It maps out every single process required for a fully controlled training enterprise. It's organized, literally, like a clock face, to help you visualize how 12 distinct systems work together in a continuous cycle, pushing your company toward that ultimate goal of learning by design. Let's start at the top of the clock to see how this builds. Positions 12 through 4 represent the leadership systems. This is where governance, strategic planning, and advisory boards set the direction and write the rules. This is where your enterprise leadership actually dictates exactly what business problems T&D should be solving in the first place. Next,
Down at the bottom of the clock face, from 5 to 7 o'clock, we find the core systems. Think of this as the factory floor of training. This is where your actual T&D products and service lines are systematically designed, developed, and deployed to your targeted audiences. Notice, though, development only happens after leadership has strategically defined the need. Finally, flanking the sides, specifically from 8 to 11 o'clock, we have the support systems. This includes the whole shebang, from marketing and communications to human and financial asset management. These systems run quietly in the background, making sure the whole machine operates efficiently and stays properly funded and staffed. Section 5. Deconstructing process chains, from stimuli to business results. To see how these 12 systems actually function, we need to realize that everything inside this clock phase is built on highly complex, interconnected processes. Drawing on B.F. Skinner's famous model, Wallace reminds us that every single human action in business is actually part of an endless chain of stimuli, responses, and consequences. Every action is just a reaction to a prior consequence. Understanding this is absolutely crucial because training is ultimately just trying to alter human responses to get better business consequences. When we map these complex chains into artificially defined boundaries, we get this really simple structure. Inputs go through a process to create outputs, and those outputs just become new inputs for the next step. This is vital. The output of your training process must perfectly match the input requirements of the downstream business unit. To put it simply, if you train someone in a skill that they can't immediately use when they sit back down at their desk, your process is totally broken. Section 6. Assessing your investments. Re-engineering for ROI. So how do you actually use this systems view to re-engineer your organization's learning efforts for maximum ROI? Well, you don't need to formally control every single process on that clock face. Honestly, some informal processes work just fine. But you must use this model to identify out-of-control systems that are causing costly business problems. You have to cherry-pick your targets. Focus your redesign efforts only on those high-payback investments that will tangibly improve human performance in critical areas. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Ask yourself, if you aren't actively controlling the vital parts of your training system, who is? Are you managing your corporate training by design, rigorously defending the bottom line, or are you just leaving your company's equity completely to chance? Take a hard look at your T&D systems and ask what you would do if it were your own money on the line. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.